Hello, my name is Danielle Blunt. Some of you might know me as Mistress Blunt, and I am a professional dominatrix based out of New York City, currently quarantining in upstate New York. And I'm here with my friend Dia Dynasty. Could you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Dynasty. I am also a professional dominatrix in New York City, as well as a shamanatrix, and we'll get to that later. I am one half of La Maison de Rouge. Lucy Sweetkill and I are co-founders, and I am the matriarch of the Femdom Farm.
I can't wait to dig into all of that. And right before we started recording, we were talking about something really amazing that you and Lucy do with La Maison de Rouge in like non-pandemic times is host these femdom gatherings. And was thinking a little bit about how we met. And I think something that like I so admire about you and what you and Lucy do with La Maison de Rouge is creating this femdom community that I really didn't have it before, like this very intentional reach out. And I was just thinking about the first email that you sent me when we went out to lunch together for the first time and just like reaching out to build that femdom community.
Yeah, it's something that I really, really miss more than anything else is that like that sisterhood. And when Lucy and I first met at the dungeon, we had a small sisterhood with some of the girls there, although we didn't choose them, of course. And that was, something that we wanted to keep building once we left. And so, aside from having La Maison de Rouge be a brand that helps educate and demystify BDSM to all kinds of people, it was important to also like gather kind of behind the scenes and talk shop and to revive the sisterhood, but with people that of course we choose.
Right. And I love that about that, because I don't come from like a house dungeon space. I like very much went independent when I first started working. So that like camaraderie and that like skill sharing and just like having people who understand the ins and outs of the industry is so important to have that community.
Yeah, so important because it can be so isolating when you're doing this on your own. And it can also feel kind of like, like there's this kind of conflict between ego and wanting to be in community sometimes. I think with this persona of dominatrix where you're like, well, maybe I should know these things, or maybe I should go find this information out on my own, versus like, I really need somebody else to relate to, I need somebody else that I can vent to these things and have them understand what I'm talking about. Cause it's like this industry is pretty unique in that like the power dynamic kind of sets the tone for so much of what we do. And that power dynamic exists, of course, like in other places, but like within the femdom community, we're all equals, and we're all trying to kind of navigate these power dynamics in such a like an unusual way too, like in our own ways. So yeah, that sisterhood and camaraderie was another thing that I also never really experienced until I got to the house dungeon, which then I was just like, this is great, like what, being an only child, it wasn't something that I was able to cultivate for myself, especially since I moved around so much. So once meeting Lucy and knowing more about Lucy and kind of like her family dynamics, she was the one that brought it more into my life and also kind of grew it too. So yeah, it's very valuable.
I miss it so much.
I miss it so much too.
It's so amazing to be in a space, like a non-competitive space with your colleagues, and it's like in this room of like incredibly powerful like femdoms, and being able to share that energy outside of a client's gaze is also something that's really enjoyable to me. And just like the fact that it's like it doesn't feel at all competitive to me. It feels like so supportive of like being able to like workshop like what's going on for someone, or if like an issue comes up in a session, like what things could we have done differently. It's just, I feel like so many other industries that are professionalized have something something like that. And it just feels so unique and special to have in the Femdom community. And I'm like so
Totally.
grateful that you reached out to me.
Yeah, me too. I'm so grateful for each and every Dom that I've come to know, like also outside of, the industry, just as friends, and to see how different we are, and like behind the scenes, of course, and then to see kind of like the Dom persona also, and just knowing that this industry has so much room for all of us, and that we don't have to be competitive, and that we can be supportive, and there isn't necessarily going to be a lack of anything.
Right.
It's more of like you said, sharing. And also, I'm more of a creative, and Lucy's definitely very adept at business, and so like I learned a lot from her through not just like direct contact, but also from her sharing her own skills with the other people, and sharing tips, and during the Femdom Farm, like talking about all these different ways of doing things. So definitely miss that, and I wish we could do that, but it's just not the same over Zoom,
I
unfortunately.
know. These like little interviews are my like mini attempt at substitution for the in-person gathering, so I can like keep some of the like femdom kink alive for myself and hopefully for other people to enjoy as well. But I feel
Yeah.
like something that we've really connected over the past few years is something a little bit unique about our ideas around like our femdom philosophies. And I would love if you would talk a little bit about like what is your femdom philosophy, and like when you call yourself a shamanetrix, like what does that mean?
Okay, so that's a lot of stuff I'm gonna cover. But first of all, I just want to say thank you for inviting me to this coffee chat, and I'm so glad that like our community is still in touch with each other, and that this is such a great idea. It's just a casual little chat, and of course, like with the La Maison de Rouge live broadcasts, is a little more systematized. And which is awesome because we have like such an amazing archive of people, but getting to deepen the connection with you through this chat, I also really value and appreciate, so thank you.
Great. Yes, and that's such a wealth of information you have. I'll definitely link to the Periscope interviews. It's so much information.
Yeah, it's many many years of so many different types of people talking about kink and sexuality. Just, yeah, it's definitely like a good pandemic, like binge watching
Yes,
series
that's such
that
a
you
good
can do.
idea. A good submissive task.
So to answer your other questions, femdom to me has evolved over the years that I've been engaged in this work, and I consider it a craft, which means something that you kind of like uh, learn more parts of and how to hone, and you will evolve like as a person, as a crafts person, as a dom, which I think is super important for longevity and sustainability, because I think in the beginning, what femdom meant to me was just kind of this persona, this like maybe slightly two-dimensional persona of like of dominance and sexiness and vixen, dangerous, like
I'm
red
like, yes,
lipstick and
yes,
high heels.
hot, but three-dimensional, yes.
Yes. But that maybe like the psychology and the emotional need of what that wasn't very clear to me yet. And over the years, I've definitely cultivated a lot of interests within kink and within femdom, and I think ultimately I've come back full circle um, to this idea of like reciprocity, where as an identity, maybe I'm more of a switch, and femdom is like one aspect of the world that I occupy. And so in femdom, it's expanded to include kind of like what reciprocity might mean in relationship to everything else around me. Um, and so, in my opinion, in the context of right now, where we live in a very heteronormative, patriarchal capitalistic kind of economy and society. Femdom is like the other side of the spectrum, where the pendulum needs to swing in order to find the balance in the middle. Because ultimately we do want to strive for harmony and balance, like I would hope. But Femdom is it's a lifestyle, it's a consciousness, it's sister to matriarchy, which is not exactly patriarchy, you know, with a female instead of a male. It's more so egalitarian and cooperative. And so the way that, you know, we're talking about these femdom gatherings and this femdom community is like, there is no hierarchy, you know, there is no like person at the top of the pyramid. It's, we're all across the board. There's no competition. It's more about collaboration. And I think like femdom can pave the way for something closer to that in our everyday lives.
I love that. I love that so much, the femdom cooperative. And like, I think that's something that I've learned about it too. And like over the years, my like dominant persona has evolved, and like totally seconding that. I think switches make the best doms. I like will like die on that hill.
It's a big hill.
It's a big hill. On it. And I think that there's something like very special about creating a space to subvert power dynamics. I think it can be an incredibly cathartic experience, as well as I like to like talk about like in yoga, they talk about like what lessons can you take off of the mat? And I like to think like, what can you take out of the dungeon? And like, I like my femdom practice to not just be about a scene, but like, how are you treating the women in your life? Like, how are you honoring like collaboration and community and like cooperative practices? And like, so for me, a lot of what that has been looking like as I've developed in my dom career is like working with folks who are working with me regularly to ensure that they have community. Because right, it's like even within my DS relationships, I don't want to be put in a position or on a pedestal where I'm infallible, where I can't make a mistake, where like my authority can't be questioned. I'd like to be able to be held accountable to a community. And I think that feels also like a subversion of like the existing power dynamics, like outside of the DS dynamic, and what you can like really bring into your life outside of a scene.
I fully agree with, you know, what can you take out of something within a sacred that happens within a sacred space or within a little capsule. Like what are you learning from it that can ripple out outward? And I love that that you've used yoga also as a reference, because I think that yoga has a lot of really amazing lessons and ideas that, you know, that can kind of be held in philosophical ways, but also in practical ways. And so that's, you know, again, like what femdom is to me. It's like not just the fantasy of like a dominant woman, because sure, that's subversive in this like this very kind of patriarchal consciousness, but like when you are thinking outside or beyond your own desires, you're expanding your consciousness, you know, like you're thinking about the women in your life, and then beyond the women in your life, maybe you're thinking about the nature, you know, and how women and nature and the oppression of the two have been very parallel. And what are you like, if you're a heteronormative cisgendered white man, how can you like expand your consciousness in ways that are, you know, not so self-serving, but like not just serving the one in front of you or the one that you like worship, but like everything that she cares about too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I I love this idea of like what can we take from femdom to like to change the world. And I think it really is. And like in these conversations, it has been coming back to this. I talked a lot about it with Lucy as well, as like the difference between erotic submission and like service submission. And I think what we're starting to talk about is the like fetishization of the dominant woman or the dominant archetype versus like taking a step back from the power that you hold and intentionally and consensually stepping away from that to like learn from and honor women and femmes
Mhm.
and like see through that like relinquishing of power what can be learned, what can be surrendered, and how can that translate to the relationships that you cultivate outside of a DS scene.
Yeah. And there's definitely like a lifestyle element to that, even though it doesn't have to become your lifestyle. You know, if your life doesn't really allow for that or doesn't have space for that, it can be an internal change and an internal shift. And I think that that's one of the more important things about kind of that disparity between um, the fantasy of the dominant woman archetype and the world of wonder that opens up when you decide that, you know, I can be in service to so much more than just my boner or just my orgasm.
It's so it's so eloquently put. It's so true. Surrendering your devotion to your boner, uh, and seeing what can happen. I have a question for you about you talked a little bit about sort of like the evolution of Dia Dynasty from like kind of more like a two-dimensional archetypal, like what you then thought was like an embodiment of power and into sort of what more sounds like a holistic understanding and cooperative understanding of femdom. I'm wondering if you have like any anecdotes or ways that you now find your work more fulfilling, or anything about like that sort of that shift in consciousness through embodying like a feminine dominant archetype that's happened for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So uh in the beginning, I think that, you know, maybe dominance wasn't necessarily something that I fully understood, and so I played the part through performance. um and it was more, I guess, along the line of service topping that I was doing, which was fun, you know, like sure, I'll do whatever you ask me to, you know, sure, I'll put Crisco on these dish gloves and, you know, um and put it in you or whatever. It's just like fun pervy stuff, right? And it was like it it was such a performance for me that I was not really remembering any of it. I was just like in the moment and in the flow and doing the flow thing, and then like coming back to my body and then being like, oh, that was fun, but I, no, I didn't retain any of that.
Like how do you integrate it too then on like
Right, totally. Um, and I would have to say that my real understanding of dominance didn't really happen until like maybe halfway through this whole, like, I've been doing this for about 11 years, so I would say like 5 years in, I started to understand more and more like that dominance wasn't about, you know, acting a certain way or saying certain things. It was just about being in your power, and that can come out in many different ways for many different people. So for me specifically, I was like, you know, I was more playful and also very spiritual, and so these two elements mingling together were expressions of my dominance. um but you know, for a while I didn't exactly know how to integrate these parts of myself into like the the ego centered persona of what I wanted to project. So there was this conflict where I was like, who am I? Am I this? Am I that? You know, like where what what works, and also like what do other people want to see me as? So that was also another factor. And then I was just like, you know what? None of that really matters. What matters right now is that I find my own core and my own center in all of this. Um, and I have to say that that was especially challenging because um, because having started this endeavor with Lucy, you know, like I was always kind of alongside her. And I'm one of those people that is very easily mutable. You know, like my sign is mutable. All my signs are mutable. And mutability kind of keeps me from being able to really, really stand solid in something, because even though I'm not necessarily a pleaser, I'm usually like, okay, that's cool with me. You know, like it's not that important for me to fight over.
That's
I'm
like the
not gonna,
surface topping. You're like, cool, sounds fun.
yeah,
Is
yeah,
it exactly what
exactly.
I want? I'm not quite sure, but like, let's do it. Sounds fun.
Yeah, let's try it. You know, I tend to live rather experimentally sometimes, so let's see what, you know, let's see what happens. And then it takes me a while to live through that experiment and then be like, this is not for me, or this is for me, I love it. So there was a period also of just kind of like being in the mode of Dynasty, but not fully cognizant and owning everything about Dia Dynasty, because I it was still kind of all up in the air. But I feel like in the last, I'm gonna say, in the last few months of pandemic, I've really, really come into my power and really, really been able to hone all the things and begin to plant seeds of what is super duper important to me. Um, and as a femdom, you know, like I actually enjoy the lifestyle of it way more than the business of it. I'm not a business person. Money's great,
I feel
but
the
it's
same way.
it's
Yeah.
it's like it's a bit of a harrowing, like tumultuous boat ride to do the business part of it, where I'm like, oh, emails, oh, you know, like rates, oh, just like all this stuff. And what I just want to do is have people that will do things for me, or that will give their bodies to me, and also who are aligned with these more philosophical beliefs that I think that you and I share, as well as that have already been established outside of femdom, like ecofeminism, which I think is amazing. Once I discovered, you know, Vandana Shiva and all of her wisdom, I was like, whoa, you know. And then also like this kind of movement of rewilding. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but like kind of
Please elaborate.
going, huh?
Please elaborate.
Okay, so rewilding, oh no, my light just went off, is this idea of like kind of coming back to our, like it's more centered on women and femmes, of coming back to our roots of who we were before all the social conditioning of patriarchy started to make us doubt who we were, like being connected to nature, having our moon cycles sync up with each other's when the moon is doing its thing, you know, like somebody in a female body like notices these things and feels that connection whether they want to or not. You know, they have to address them to some degree. And so if you have like, you know, not every female body person has a menstrual cycle, but if you have a menstrual cycle, you will notice that when you're around other people with menstrual cycles, that they start to sync up, which is one
Right.
of the
So
things.
people with menstrual cycles, it does happen. I've noticed in the femdom spaces, we often are like, I'm like still synced up with like half of the doms who would go to the the femdom meetings.
Exactly.
And I like from what I'm sort of hearing a little bit, it's like that return to ritual that connects us with nature, with systems of organization outside of capitalism is also part of what femdom is about.
Yes, and also the the root of connection that we are all, you know, that we are all still connected to, but will forget sometimes. Um, the menstrual cycle being one of them, but also like how a lot of women and femmes are naturally good at healing and taking care of others, animals, plants, you know, whatever, creating food and craft, which in bulk is a pagan holiday that just passed. And it's one of the things that we do, like, because we're connected to, we are a part of the natural world, you know. It's not that we're just connected, we're all a part of it. um and like food and craft being some of the things that reminds us, you know, that like spring is on its way and we have to keep the fire burning, and whatever, you know, like whatever thing you do in the kitchen, you know,
Even that
it's
you have a
something that,
body that like needs to be fed and sustained and nurtured and cared for. You
yes,
can't just like click, click, clack for 12
yeah.
hours a day.
No, yeah, and you need to feed yourself, and you need to keep your creative fire alive, um by doing something, you know, like that part of you is inherent and needs feeding. So yeah, totally. Yeah, so rewilding, you know, is this whole other thing. And then a lot of the um a lot of the indigenous knowledge that I've been coming into also is based in kind of like matrilineal storytelling, and a lot of these a lot of the matriarchal figures are also seed keepers. And so that to me is very like close to nature and about the rewilding process of like remembering that we hold, like in our physical bodies, all the seeds, you know, we were born with all these seeds. um and whether we choose to birth them or whatever, you know, of course we need the right conditions, and you know, these things are very natural and inherent to the way that we live, you know, creating a home, creating warmth. So there is like, it's rich with symbolism but also meaning. This what femdom covers, it's not just, you know, kinky stuff, but it includes kinky stuff because, you know, kink also is a naturally occurring thing, and you know, in nature, kind of like homosexuality is a naturally occurring thing in nature, as is prostitution, and you know, all kinds of these like more wild and instinctual animal parts of ourselves.
Right. And something you were saying about these seeds reminds me of this Kabbalah, like Jewish mysticism myth of Tikkun Olam, which is like in my like paraphrasing of like a very beautiful like mythological story, is the idea that when the universe was created, it was like the shattering and little pieces of light were in every living creature, and it was through the like reassemblage and collecting of those shards or those seeds and like working collaboratively in community that the Messiah would come. And I think this is like a very beautiful myth that like always stuck with me through childhood, that like I still sort of like reflect on in my reflections of BDSM and femdom and spirituality. And like I think it's sort of alluded to in yoga too, like namaste, like the light in me acknowledges the light in you. And I think it's like through coming together, we're like really able to embody that. And so one thing that I hear you talking about as like this shift from a more like two-dimensional, like archetypal, like service top into like your current understanding of like what femdom means to you and like how you embody it and practice it, is this idea of like becoming, it's like going back to what you were saying about reciprocity. And then what I'm also hearing is this idea of boundaries, is like knowing the self, like self-awareness, and knowing what your boundaries are so that you can hold them and get the needs met. It's like a two-part process of like being self-aware enough to know what your needs are and being able to like create the space to do the work so you're able to like acknowledge desires that are often repressed, and like creating the boundaries so that you can pursue those desires, which like for me in my practice has been a lot less. I think I've been working for maybe 10 to 12 years. I was doing BDSM in like my personal life beforehand, so I'm not totally sure when I started going pro.
The natural progression.
Yeah, truly. But I think part of that evolution for me too was like just continually being like, no, that's not something I'm interested in. That's not something I'm interested in. And I say it on my website. It's like, I'm not interested in your fantasy. Like I'm interested in the space where where our desires intersect. And that my desires will not intersect with everyone. And like, I am totally fine with that. And this idea of what you were talking about, of it being like a lifestyle, I'm also like much more interested in these like patron type figures who are interested in learning from me in that type of role. Like I like I don't like the power dynamics present with like patron and muse, but I kind of like I love the idea of it. And I mean, yeah, it's like taking the power dynamics, the fucked up power dynamics outside of these systems, but still like taking some of what's great, because like material contribution is necessary in this world. And I feel like both of us are people who want to like, are kind of like space makers to like, or like people who are interested in holding the space or containing the space or like creating space for ritual to happen. And like, it's been really sweet for me to like invite people into that space, especially when there's like a form of material support is what they're offering for like access to this space, that they're also like creating the space in my life to allow for it to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with this idea that you and I are space makers and space holders. I think space is like terribly overlooked in our culture. The space to be vulnerable, the space to make mistakes, the space to grow in
that space sounds great.
Yeah, right. Let's have more of that, please. The space to transition and to transform, you know, the way that moths and butterflies create that space with that shell, and then inside they feel free to turn into a goo, you know, a formless goo. Like,
that's
when
like
do we ever
like
get
what happens in scenes sometimes? It's like you create the container and literally can like turn someone to mush, and like sometimes there's some transformation that happens that can like fly out of the dungeon.
Yeah, exactly. I love that so much. It's so fulfilling to see, you know, maybe even just a tiny spark of a seed being planted, where that transformation takes place as you know, time goes by too. So I think that that's a really important aspect of femdom, really, is holding that space for somebody else and creating that space for these kind of unknowns to happen.
I love that. And I love the idea of like hammering down this idea of like reciprocity, because it's like we can do that for other people. And something I've been like working on in my personal life is creating this space for myself to have those experiences as well. And I know you're talking about switching. I know like we both have some switchy tendencies as well. Mine, I like to execute every other year. Which the pandemic has postponed. But that idea of reciprocity, and I see some of it coming through, it's like the space we hold for clients or submissives in the context of a scene, as well as a space that we hold for each other, for like to like fuck up, to break down, to be vulnerable in that like femdom community. That it's something that's very unique and special that I don't have in a lot of other aspects of my life. But that idea of reciprocity, that both like we can hold this space for others and we can also be vulnerable and allow that space to be held for ourselves as well.
Yeah, and all of that is so valuable in growth, which is ultimately what nature wants to do. Nature wants to grow, and we're a part of nature. But also the reciprocity being that is kind of the cycle of it's not, you know, tit for tat. Sometimes there's a little more on one side than the other, and then other times there's a little more on the other side, you know. But it's also based in abundance mentality, you know, abundance consciousness, where I have enough and I'm going to keep giving because that's what I do. I'm going to keep holding these spaces because that's what I do. I'm naturally this kind of person. And so in being this kind of person, you create relationships with everything and everybody around you. You know, like I have the relationship with this plant right here, this plant, Miss Lily, because she's providing oxygen and like cleanliness to my home and beauty. And so I will take care of her, not because of what I get out of her, but because that's what I like to do. you know, like I enjoy providing. So it's reciprocity is sourced in the origin rather than what you're getting. You know what I mean?
And it's so interesting. That is also part of the Tikkun Olam gift, which like a myth gift, which also talks about the different ways of like bringing those sparks together is through community service is another meaning of the word Tikkun Olam. And that like the top tier of community service is a donation gifted without a name, so that there's no expectation of being thanked. So you're it's like solely an act of like of generosity,
Yeah.
without attachment to ego. And I think it's like that idea that reciprocity, in like in femdom relationships or in any relationship, isn't necessarily linear, right? Like if someone is doing a service task for me, I like they might be getting something out of the act of doing that service for me that like kind of like ties them to me. While my energy isn't necessarily being directly extended towards them, that act of service is like working on the relationship as a whole. And I think of that as like a ritual practice, as you would like it's in some ways like pray to someone or like write in a journal. And like you can create these relationships that are reciprocal but not necessarily like completely
Symmetrical.
Yeah, I think that's a great way. And or like linear, like it's like
Yeah.
it comes back. And I think what we forget is sometimes there will be times where like one is doing more work or spiraling, or like one needs to do more of that work to keep that connection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's not like perfectly parallel all the time or perfectly symmetrical, but in the grand scheme of things, it's balanced, and everybody benefits.
Balanced and reciprocal in a capacity that's maybe not linear or parallel, as well as like ideally like mutually beneficial, I think is like the part that I like to hammer home about like femdom and DS relationships. Like it's not necessarily always looks like it's balanced, but that dynamic should be mutually fulfilling to each party, and like having conversations about like what makes it mutually fulfilling.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we all have different needs, you know. I mean, we all have similar needs, but we also have different needs. And ideally, you know, you are a circle and you come together with something or somebody else and you form this little it's called a vesica piscis, which is, you know, the yoni shaped thing in the middle, and both of your needs are met, even though they're not the same needs all the time, because ideally you're taking care of your own like basic needs,
and that you have other that it's not just two circles is the other thing I try and hammer home in like DS dynamics, is like I really don't like being someone's only source for kink. I find it to be and like I'm happy to work with people who that is the case, where I am the only outlet, but I also encourage people to like reach out beyond that. And I know like not everyone's going to live like a 24/7 DS dynamic or have these like lifestyle femdom relationships, but the idea that there are multiple people in your life that you can talk about some of your relationships with feels really important to me.
Ideally, yeah, like you have a support system, not just a cane.
Totally. And like and I think it puts too much pressure on me as a dom to be someone's like one and only, especially like I feel like previously in my career, a lot of my clients weren't as open with their partners, whereas now a lot of them
Woo. Speaking of
interlude from my partner, Franklin. I have no clue what I was talking about. But maybe Frankie was trying to tell us that this is the perfect time to transition to the vision for the Femdom Farm. I would love to hear a little bit about what your vision is, where you're at with that process, and like what like seeds you're hoping to plant.
Okay. I love talking about this. So thank you, Frankie. Thank you, Franklin, for the cue. So the Femdom Farm is a physical space. And as we were talking about holding spaces, I feel like this is kind of my magnum opus, and it's not just about me. You know, there's going to be a lot of people involved in creating and bringing this space together and growing it, but it's a physical space that was a farm. And so there are buildings on it. There's a farmhouse and a barn full of hay. There are two silos, two grain silos, one on each end of the barn. There's a heifer shed, which houses the tractor and the baler and all the other things. There is a guest cottage, which I believe has 3 bedrooms. And then there's a maple shack, which lives in the woods. It's 80 acres. It's half wooded and half pasture. It's on a hill.
Sounds amazing.
It's amazing because it's very, you know, it's close to nature. There's a lot of space, and you know, it's essentially like in the lens of kink, it's a giant kinky playground. Like there isn't necessarily going to be a designated dungeon because the whole place is the play space.
I love that. And I saw you like posting when I was following on your OnlyFans, like, what would I do to you on this tree? It's like so hot. It's like when I like furnish spaces or design spaces, I'm like, how can this be pervertible? So like there's like hard points on the wall, just like part of the decor. It's not like I have to like traverse downstairs into a dungeon space. And I feel this way about both of our relationship with moss is another thing we have in common. It's just like, yes, that I will now be have a sensual, intimate, romantic relationship with this moss covered rock. It's like outside of the bedroom.
I want to be a moss covered rock, you know, I want to touch myself and only feel moss. You know?
Was it at the party where Shine and Emmy were rolling around to become one with the moss for us? That's what I'm imagining. Scenes like that would happen at the Femdom Farm.
Oh yeah, and more, you know, because it's going to be a place that also has certain spaces. There's a pretty large basement in the farmhouse, so there's going to be there's kind of like a weird little chicken coop in the basement right now, which, you know, it's about the dimensions of, let's say, a tiny Brooklyn bedroom, a tiny Manhattan bedroom, and it's done in like this weird chicken wire, which I'm going to replace with actual jail bars. And so it's going to be a functioning, you know, jail cell. And then there are, you know,
I love how my friends have functioning prison cells in their basement.
Right? Like not enough, because sometimes you just got to lock a bitch up, and where do you go for that?
Do you need some alone time, sweetie?
Right, you got to go in timeout in the jail. And so also the shack, the maple shack in the woods, is originally built for all, you know, harvesting the syrup from all the maple trees in the woods. But I don't, you know, I haven't started learning about that yet, and I intend to, and I'm definitely going to have some help. But until then, it is the initiation shack, let's call it. And I've definitely tweeted about, you know, some fantasies where I like abduct somebody and bring them in with the bag over their head and then throw them in there with, you know, like a chain and a collar and a bottle of water and a shovel. You know, that's like all you get for however much time I decide that it takes for you to kind of like.
I love this. I've been loving your tweets about the farm. I recently had a prisoner in mommy's basement, and my favorite sadistic thing that I did in mommy's basement was this prisoner really liked cream. And so we were like playing with like regimenting food intake. And so I went down and brought them a bowl of cream. And I had Frankie, who interrupted us before, as my like well-trained dog by my side. So he came down with me and I told him to sit. And then I put the cream out and they reached for it. And I was like, no. And then Frankie ate the cream in front of them. And I was just like, oh, it was so perfect. The look on their face.
Oh my goodness.
Chef's kiss. Perfect.
I love it. Oh gosh. Like, oh no, all that cream. I thought it was for me.
I could also, I am like very against surveillance technologies, but in mommy's basement, we did have an upgraded surveillance system put in, and now I have a surveillance fetish. So would 10 out of 10 recommend for
Yeah.
the initiation shed? Because you can like,
Oh, I like that. Yeah. Because that definitely satisfies like the control aspect and also the voyeurism aspect.
and like a safety thing too.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Why not also?
Practical. Yeah.
Fun.
I like that. Yeah, the servant. Okay. Because now you can do like you can do all that through your phone. So that's
Yeah.
really
I don't love the systems or the ethics behind the technology, but it was very fun to be able to like speak to my prisoner without them seeing me, or being able to be like, why are you doing that? This is what you're supposed to be doing. I said don't fucking move. Or like hearing them when they talked, and like I had like multiple doms here, and we were just like scouring over the footage. It was so, we all had a new fetish after that weekend in mommy's basement.
Oh yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's so interesting. I had a chastity slave for a long time, and he would put himself on surveillance for me. And I didn't fully take advantage of that. You know, I was just kind of like, I have to say that I missed a lot of opportunities with him. And this was, you know, during my time of like transition where I didn't know who I wanted to be or who I was. So I, you know, I definitely had those seeds planted and didn't water them. Thank you for the reminder. So the Femdom Farm is also a place beyond just like a kinky playground and maybe some, you know, lifestyle engagements. It's a place that will be a forever home for my mother and I. And that's kind of the genesis of this whole idea, where my mom was like, well, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do later? And I couldn't imagine my mom going to live like in a retirement community or a home. There isn't really anybody else, you know, like all of her sisters have families or are intolerable. And I want my mom near me. You know, she's she's an amazing cook, but she's also just like so sweet and so funny.
Dude said that was so cute.
Put my mom to work. No, she's just like really funny and sweet and open-minded, and she knows what I do. And I think that she would really kind of like enjoy kind of being a secondhand, you know, femdom.
My
Like,
mom's the same way. She's like, when's one of your submissives gonna get me a pair of shoes? She's like, what do I have to do for those red bottoms?
oh yeah, my mom asked me a really like funny question like that in that vein, where she's like, maybe you can set me up with one of your submissives. And I'm like, no, mom, don't go there. But I will bring you to the Femdom Farm, and you can, you know, boss some of them around without having to marry them. But you know, she's really important to me. she was a single mother. She did like so much stuff in her early motherhood that was like not done, you know, culturally, like divorcing a man after he abused her in many different ways. So, you know, my mom is extremely strong and a total inspiration to me, and very grounded and practical. And she has a garden. So, you know, that's another thing that she and I are going to do together, is garden. And I want to create a whole garden just with her, even though we have gardens at the Femdom Farm already, many of which are full of prickly berries, which, you know, I'm excited to get some subs to
garden, perhaps.
Yeah, some gardening subs. And since they have like brambly stems and branches, it would be funny to like, I don't know, have a sub wear something kind of like frilly and that will catch on those things and try to harvest berries while they're all caught in the brambles. That'd be cute.
I will say, you have some of the most creative sadism that I've encountered.
Yes, thank you.
Sadism. Very, very endearing.
And I have to say that, you know, my creativity is so enriched and fueled by nature. Like I'm just like, I'm just feeling, I'm just feeding off of what's there, you know? So my mom and I, you know, will have a forever home there. And it's also going to be a place of learning and re-educating where what where the main um belief systems are connection to nature through connection to spirit through nature. So like I think I guess the most general term that I can use is paganism, because it's a kind of like a, a pantheistic belief system that honors like every living thing, which is in line with indigenous practices, the way that they honored the spirit of everything and every force, like even, you know, the force that pushes mushrooms up through the ground and the force that decomposes, you know, dead things. So there's going to be a melding of, you know, like these indigenous practices and wisdom, paganism, and all done through kind of like a more matriarchal cooperative way. And I'm forgetting something. I definitely have. Let me look at my notes real quick. I had some notes. Feminism also
Yeah.
in. Okay, so I had mentioned ecofeminism as well, being a very important philosophical component of how we re-educate and bringing that into everybody's consciousness, because I think a lot of people, you know, don't see the parallels between the oppression of women and nature, but they're very obvious once you start looking. um and and it's also, so like you'd mentioned the word holistic, and I think that that's definitely the overall approach to everything, is like taking into consideration all the parts of being human and all the parts of being a part of the natural world and bringing them together to harmonize. So like a lot of, you know, Western medicine treats like acute symptoms, where a lot of times the actual source of the dis-ease is, you know, not, you know, your skin
Right. Something
or
larger.
right, it's something larger, and sometimes it's even something unseen. So that's kind of like how we embody spirit, is that we take into consideration like the energetic, the emotional, the physical, the environmental, the sexual, and everything, and treat, you know, not that everybody that's coming is going to be sick, but you know, it's for healing our relationship with nature, which
I think part of like holistic medicine and holistic thinking to me is like not just treating people who have symptoms or who are sick, but like living in a way that promotes that harmony and balance within the self. And like
yeah.
I like personally, like I'm all for like Western and like Eastern interventions for medicine, like what works for you. But I think part of what like I really like about holistic thinking is that like and rituals is that all of these things support your life before you're in crisis.
Yes,
Like
yes,
both ritual,
absolutely.
holistic medicine, and like community. It's like you
Yeah.
already have these structures and these systems in place that are there to support you. So
Yes.
when you're in crisis or when you're symptomatic, you don't then have to go and assemble these structures for yourself.
Right. Yeah. You nailed it. So thank you.
Um, well, I love this idea, and it's something that I've always wanted, as well as like to like have this space. I think it's like my vision is slightly different, so I'm like so excited to see yours coming into fruition. And I've actually talked with my mom about it too, who said that she wanted to like work on a communal farm when she was younger, and like sort of like very similar to what you're talking about. So maybe my mom and your mom can meet and be friends.
I hope so. I hope that all kinds of moms come, you know. Um, the I think that the aspect of working on a farm, and then also one thing that you brought up quite a bit is ritual. Like we have rituals in our culture, but they're like, a lot of them are kind of like commercialized, and a lot of them are also public. And there's, you know, there's like the whole wedding ceremony ritual, and the whole like baby shower ritual and things like that. But then if you're a person who's giving birth,
yeah,
but it's also like worth celebrating personal rituals and personal achievements and personal transitions.
yeah,
And one thing that we do ritualize, which I don't think that we go in depth enough with, is death. And I think that you've talked about this to some degree, in your yearning to do like kind of full spectrum doula.
Yeah.
Yes, to die.
I can't wait to die. I think, and maybe this is a perfect way to like tie this conversation up, is to talk about death, because I think that one thing that BDSM does is it's like, right, like la petite mort, like the little death. It is a way to refer to an orgasm, but I think even more so, like this altered state that you can get to through intense BDSM play is a way to like encounter and honor death, like the death of something. Like many people who I've played with have talked about like that subspace or a top space that I go to as like a transcendent kind of like that gooey state of like, it's not existing, but like not existing in the reality around you. Like everything kind of goes dark around you, and it's just the two of you in this like intimate attunement connection that can create like the death of something, which creates space for the birth of something else. And yeah, like
Yes.
totally fetishize the idea of being a full service, full spectrum death doula.
Yes, I think that's so important, you know. And it's like, this idea of death isn't confined to just like when our physical bodies pass from the material plane, or, you know, we expire. It's so like, it's so many things, just like you'd mentioned. It's in some schools of thought, like it can represent like a transition out of a certain state of being and into a more formless state of being, which I think like, some people will use ego death as
But
a
I hear
term
you
for that.
talking about that too in your relationship to like your previous iterations of Domina Dynasty. It's like, and I think that way to some extent with like my like public performance of Mistress Blunt and embodiment of like, there have been like many little deaths when like this no longer serves me. And I think in like in my personal life as well, it's like creating the space to honor the things that need to die.
Yes.
Because I feel like so often, well, it's like so often when we like mourn the dead, we mourn them as if they aren't flawed. And I think like part of like celebrating life is celebrating like, or like honoring the flaws as well and being realistic about that. But I think,
Yeah.
and I think like I'm thinking right now of like coping mechanisms, and I think coping mechanisms that no longer serve us are a really interesting point in which we can like honor the dead and like what no longer serves us. And like that coping mechanism was there for a reason. It like probably helped you through something, and you clearly learned that tool for a reason. And some of the like the deaths that I've mourned in ritual ways are like the coping mechanisms that no longer serve me, or that have like caused me, or that like I've used as ways, or like that have gotten me into conflict, or where have like caused me to hurt someone. Not that like I don't have agency in that, but like the things that I learned caused me to hurt, and like I have learned more tools where like I have more things in my tool belt, and like that's not something that I have to rely on, and like I can like let go of it and like honor it, even though it's like not this like great part of me that I'm like super proud of, but it's like that served a purpose. Goodbye.
Right. Yeah. And letting that version of yourself die, and maybe having a little ceremony for it, And I think that these little private rituals are extremely important. And, you know, built into the pagan wheel, it are times of the year for these things, and then built into the lunar cycle are also times of the month for these things. So, you know, being a wild person means kind of remembering that this is a process and a part of you that you can engage with through ritual or otherwise, as a way of growth.
Yeah.
And again, like nature, which is what we are, we just want to grow. You know, you have a plant and some of it gets cut off and you put it in water and it just keeps growing.
Yeah.
So that's what we are. And I think that it's really important. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say in nature too, there's a purpose of death. Like I'm thinking about like rotating crops to like,
yes,
like to keep like the integrity of the soil so that things can grow is reliant on death as some part, and like remembering like, right, like we are nature, and like we're not capitalism wants us to feel as though we're not moved by the natural world around us, and like isolates us from our sexualities, from like our like kinky desires, and from like our like presence, and like being grounded in the world and being like creatures who are capable of being in touch with like more primal desires.
Yes, primal desires. That's a good way to put it. Yeah, and I think also, you know, the Femdom Farm is a place that is relatively anti-capitalist.
Right.
Granted, it took some money to buy. I'm not going to focus on like, you know, you have to pay this much money to be there. I want to, of course, like take care of all the things that are financial responsibilities, like paying the taxes or whatnot. But I'll be realistic about the kind of economy is that I want it to be a natural economy, and I want to go back to kind of trading and care economy, trading, bartering,
an economy of reciprocity, which might not
yes,
look totally balanced on a capitalist level. Like
right,
depending on how you're looking at it, I feel like economies of reciprocity don't necessarily look balanced, especially because everyone's like, I'm thinking of this from like a chronic illness lens, like everyone's ability to
yes,
like engage with capitalism and access to capital is different, and what people have to offer is
mhm,
so different. And I think something from like indigenous learning that like I've taken in like disability studies is like this space for sickness
mhm,
and of like being like one as like a need for rest. And this is mostly like speaking to like my own experience with chronic illness, which has like largely just been like a message for me to rest, and
mhm,
like that I need more rest than a lot of people, or I'm just like more tapped into like the body's desire and need for rest. And I think when I've like thought about creating spaces like this, it's very much um like offer what you're able to.
mhm, yeah.
And
And don't, you know, don't push yourself to align with some like capitalist structure or schedule where you know you have to like immediately answer something or immediately tend to something or like put out fires or whatever that means, you know, like just don't have any fires. Anyway, I'm sorry, that's not, you know, that's kind of ableist for me to say, but it's like I think that, you know, you're
well, it's
talking
like maybe don't respond to it as if everything was a fire. I feel
right,
like
exactly.
how I
Yeah.
heard it is like, and it's something, so I saw someone's email signature was like, as a way to depart from like the capitalist structure of immediate response, I will be taking 2 weeks to respond to all messages at least. And I was like, fuck yeah, thank you. Can
Yes.
I I
I
think
saw
Alex
that.
said, feel free to copy this email signature.
Yeah, I love that one. And I was like, oh yeah, that's really smart, you know, because you're kind of managing expectations that have been set by capitalism
Andrew
and these
offering
systems.
someone like a chance to do the same,
Mm-hmm.
which I
Yeah.
liked about that. But yeah, I'm super excited for the Femdom Farm and to come visit because I feel like we're very close in our upstate abodes. But
Yes.
is there anything else you wanted to say, or like where can people find you?
Um, well, I'm like kind of at maybe like 50% capacity um with my work right now. So I'm definitely being really, really careful who I see and who deserves my time. But you can find me on Twitter at Domina Dynasty. And if you really want to reach out to me, you can fill out a submission form at dominadynasty.com. And those are the two channels of communication that I'm most frequent. Everything else is kind of like, you know, like the deplatforming of sex workers is really shitty. And I'm definitely, you know, less engaged with other forms of social media. And I'm also on Sext Panther as Domina Dynasty. And my OnlyFans, of course, I'm going to start growing as a space of, let's say, matriarchal reconditioning.
I love that. I've been noticing some of your posts and really enjoying them.
Thank you. So I'm kind of like reforming or reformatting that a little bit too. And coming from a kind of a more spiritual aspect as well, like a more spiritual approach. So that's, you know, that's going to be something that I'm also growing is the idea of like devotion, worship, offerings, and bringing that spiritual slant into femdom.
Love it. I love it so much. And I'm at Mistress Blunt on Instagram and Twitter, and onlyfans.com/Mistress Blunt. MistressBlunt.com. There's a ton of information on that website. I'm also not taking on new clients besides for extended training sessions at the moment. I feel you with proving that you're worthy of my time is an important way to make a first impression.
That's right. The temple hours are, you know,
if you're offering at the door, we'll answer you if we deem you worthy.
Exactly.
Well, it was so good to chat with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was really awesome. I so enjoyed this.
Me too.